Okay, so this one is about equilibrium on the market of goods in the closed economy. And what we should start with is defining the components of aggregate demand in the closed economy. So aggregate demand is the overall demand for goods and services in the economy, and it consists of three items: G, government spending, I, investment, and C, consumption. So G is an exogenous variable standing for the level of government spending, and exogenous here means that we are unable to predict or explain the value of government spending based on this model. So yeah, basically government spending level is just up to government, so it's a part of fiscal policy implemented by government, and we treat it as some exogenous variable. So government spending might take the form of current or capital spending, where current spending consists of some regular expenses of government paid on regular basis, and capital spending is all about financing some major capital/infrastructural projects. So for instance, if government pays wages to employees in state-owned enterprises, we recognize this as current government spending, and if government finances building new stadium or hospital or whatsoever, we recognize this as capital government spending. Please keep in mind that direct transfers, like transfers from government to households, including all types of social security benefits like unemployment benefits or retirement benefits, are not recognized as the part of government spending, and they are not treated as the part of GDP, even though technically government spends money on financing social security benefits. Okay, I believe it's fine. Investment. Investment consists of all the spending of private enterprises on capital goods and production facilities. Also, it includes household spending on real estate. So in this model, we assume that level of investment is not affected by the level of income, is determined only by the interest rate. And this relationship is negative. Like, firms have to borrow money from financial institutions like banks. And for firms, interest rate is the cost of borrowing. So when the cost of borrowing increases, they are less likely to borrow and they are less likely to purchase capital goods. So based on this, you conclude that there is a negative relationship between investment and interest rate. When interest rate increases, investment decreases, and vice versa. C. C stands for consumption or household spending on goods and services. Here we assume consumption consists of two components. C0 is autonomous consumption, some level of consumption which does not depend on the level of income. And this is the proportion of consumption which is actually determined by the level of disposable income. So maybe we shall start with disposable income first. Disposable income is equal to Y minus T, where T is tax revenue, like it stands for taxes collected by government. And analogously to government spending, it's an exogenous parameter. It's part of fiscal policy implemented by government. We can't explain or predict the volume of taxes collected, like the size of the tax revenue or tax burden. That's why we also treat it as exogenous variable. So basically, disposable income is what is left, what you can dispose after all the taxes are paid. And C1 is MPC, or marginal propensity to consume, and it describes the proportion spent on purchasing goods and services out of additional unit of income. Okay, I believe it's fine. So, equilibrium on the market of goods implies that aggregate demand is equal to output, and they are both equal to some equilibrium level of income. So basically, all the goods produced in the economy within a period are consumed, and all the goods consumed in the economy within a given period are produced in the economy in the respective period. So basically, there is no shortage of goods, there are no leftovers. That's why we refer this condition as equilibrium on the market of goods. So keeping this in mind, like looking at the aggregate demand function formula, you can replace both aggregate demand and income component with y star. And when you do so, you can rearrange this equation to get something like this. So y star times 1 minus C1 is equal to government spending plus investment plus autonomous consumption minus C1 times taxes. So this part is called autonomous demand. You know, some level of demand which does not depend on the level of income. Even like basically this will be the value of aggregate demand if the value of income is equal to 0. Finally, you divide both sides by 1 minus C1 and this is what you get. So this is level of output, which corresponds to level of income and aggregate demand when economy is in equilibrium. When there is an equilibrium on the market of goods. So you can do the same analysis using simple Keynesian cross model. Like this is the line with the slope equal to 1. On each point of this line, aggregate demand is equal to aggregate output. So when you have the intercept of this line with aggregate demand curve, you have two conditions fulfilled simultaneously. First, you are located on the aggregate demand curve. Second, economy is in equilibrium. So there is an equilibrium on the market of goods. You draw aggregate demand curve based on this formula. So when you open the brackets, you shall get G plus I plus C0 plus C1 times Y minus C1 times T. So then it's easy to detect that G plus I plus C0 minus C1 times T, like what you have here, will stand for autonomous demand. So this will be the value of intercept and the slope of this function will be equal to C1. So this function is upward sloped and it's rather flat because, as I said before, C1 always takes value between 0 and 1. So this means this function is increasing, but the slope is equal to 1, which means that function is rather flat. And this is the value of intercept. Or, as I said before, the value of aggregate demand if the level of output is equal to 0. So using the same model, you can analyze, the effect of change in various exogenous variables and parameters on the level of aggregate output or income or GDP. So let's say we have increase in marginal propensity to consume. So now households are gonna spend bigger proportion, of their additional dollar of income on purchasing goods and services. So first, function will become steeper because C1 increases and increase in the value of slope means that function becomes steeper and the function will shift down. Because C1 prime is bigger than C1, then the value of this expression shall be smaller than the value of this expression. And if the value of intercept decreases, the function shifts down. So as a result, we have new equilibrium with bigger value of output. Yeah, so as simple as it is. Now there is a task for you. Using the same Keynesian cross model, you have to analyze the effect of increase in government spending on output. I mean equilibrium output. If you'd like to practice, keeping this formula in mind and using Keynesian cross model, it's a good moment to put this video on hold and I'm proceeding with the solution. So if we increase government spending, so G prime is bigger than G, then we have bigger value of intercept, the function will shift up. The value of slope will not be affected, so basically we have just a parallel shift, and this corresponds to the new bigger equilibrium level of income / output / GDP. Okay, so when it comes to national saving, we distinguish between private saving, what is left after paying all the taxes and financing consumption expenditures, and public saving. So let's start with private saving first. So private saving is described by the formula y minus c minus t. So as I said, basically what is left after you pay taxes as a household and after you finance consumption. For government, taxes are the main source of revenue, and government spending is basically kind of expense for government. So for government, public saving will be equal to revenue minus expense, tax revenue minus government spending. When you sum up private saving and public saving, you will get national saving. So after doing this, you shall get y minus c minus g. Simply open the brackets and calculate. If you get back to the aggregate demand formula, here, maybe here, you will also see that if you subtract government spending and consumption from output, you will get investment. So those two expressions are identical, and based on this, you conclude that savings are equal to investment in the closed economy. Here we assume that savings does not depend on the level of interest rate. So if it increases or decreases, it does not affect your saving decision. And there is a negative relationship between interest rate and desired investment. As I said before, for firms, R is just the cost of borrowing. And R stands for real interest rate, if I forgot to mention this before. So interest rate is the cost of borrowing. When it decreases, we invest more. When it increases, we invest less. And here invest means purchase capital goods and production facilities. So equilibrium interest rate would be determined by the intercept of desired investment and saving function. So this is just the condition to have desired investment equal to saving, or have an equilibrium on the market of goods, as I mentioned before. Okay, so the same model can be used to analyze changes in interest rate and investment in equilibrium. For instance, consider this case. Government decided to increase government spending. And when government spending increases, ceteris paribus, meaning that the rest of variables remain unchanged, saving decreases. So if saving decreases, S-curve shifts to the left, and as you can see here, this is followed by increase in interest rate here and decrease in equilibrium investment, because we move from this point to this point. Okay. Again, at this point, we assume that saving does not depend on the level of interest rate. So savers are not affected by the value of interest rate, which is not true, however, or not always true, let's say. Like intuitively, if interest rate is the cost of borrowing for borrowers, it's also reward on saving for savers. So theoretically, if there is higher interest rate, then savers should find, this option of saving money in bank or in any financial institution more attractive. However, we will proceed to this case. So here is the task for you. Analyze the effect of increase in taxes on domestic interest rate. Assume that saving does not depend on the interest rate. So if you'd like to practice, please put this video on hold and I will proceed with solution. And here is the answer. So actually saving is not affected by higher taxes, at least, under the framework of analyzed model. Higher taxes decrease private saving, but increase public saving. As a result, national saving is neutral, so there will be no change on this graph. Okay, another task for you. Government introduced legislation forcing firms to increase wages. Analyze the effect of this policy, assuming that S function is inelastic with respect to interest rate. So basically it will mean that you have a saving function with slope equal to infinity, It won't, the value of saving will not change depending on the value of interest rate. Again, if you'd like to practice, put this video on hold and I am proceeding with the solution. So, Higher wages imply higher cost of production. If cost of production increases, then firms desire to produce less and desired investment decreases. I have no idea why I put this in this way. So desired investment will decrease, investment curve will shift to the left, interest rate will decrease, and investment will not be affected. Okay, another task. Government introduced legislation forcing firms to increase wages, blah blah blah. Basically, it's the same. The only difference is that you have to assume this time that the volume of saving will depend on interest rate. And as I mentioned before, this dependency should be positive. So again, if you'd like to analyze it, please put this video on hold, and here you have the solution. So okay, whatever. So again, as I said before, if wages increase, cost of production increases. If cost of production increases, desired investment decreases. Investment curve will shift to the left. So in this case, if we actually assume that saving is elastic with respect to interest rate, so of course, like this dependency is positive, as I mentioned before. So in this case, you actually have decrease in interest rate and decrease in investment. So just to make a brief summary here, everything will actually depend on your assumption, about the relationship between the volume of saving and real interest rate. Okay, so that was it. Next time we're gonna proceed to the open economy, and I thank you for your attention.